Hi, welcome to the 8th part in my video series of 3ds Max tips and tricks. In this part I'm going to be going over rendering techniques, assuming about no knowledge. I don't really use rendering too much other than to sort of present my work in picture form, so I'm not an expert, but if you just want to do similar sorts of things, then I can take you through some of the basics here. Okay, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make a teapot so that we've got something to render. Teapot's nice because it's got a lot of nice surfaces, so easy to tell what's going on with your renderer. I'll just crank up the segments so it's a slightly nicer looking teapot. Okay, first shortcut you should become familiar with is F9, which takes a quick render. So you see there we have now a render. A render is a sort of still image of your object. It is a little bit more complex than just taking a screenshot in your scene, because the viewport is not as powerful as what you can do in renders. So it is sometimes useful to do that. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see a bit better, and I'll hit F9 again to take another render. There we are, and you can see it's filling up a bit more of the space. Now if you want to change the resolution of your render, unfortunately this is going to be filling up a lot of the screen because this window is necessarily large, so I apologise for that. I can maybe make it a bit shorter, but I don't think I can scale it in. Oh, maybe a little. So if you do want to change the resolution, go into Rendering, Render Setup. That's F10 on your keyboard, and sort of if you've got common parameters open, then these buttons here will change the resolution. You can also type them in here. So I'm going to leave it at 640 480. That's fine for what I'm doing. We'll come back to this window later. Okay, first thing that I really don't like is this black background. Anywhere that I've got a dark face, it's kind of being lost into the background. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to grey. We can go into anything in the sort of background is a part of environment, which you can get to with hotkey 8. Change the colour here, background. You can also use a picture, but for now I'm just going to use a background colour. I'll pick a mid-grey. Should be suitable. Again, F9, and we re-render it, and it's looking more suitable, and you can see where the edges end now. Okay, this is a pretty uninteresting render. One technique that is quite nice to display your models in is something that's called clay rendering, because it kind of looks like clay. So to do that, I would recommend you change to grey materials. You don't have to, but it sometimes looks a bit nicer. So I'll just close this down. And I'll close this. This will come up again when I hit F9. I'm going to click on my object, and I could assign in a material, but for now I'm just happy with the colour. So I'll just go on grey, and I will make a flat plane for my object to cast a shadow onto. So just a simple plane is fine. You can make it nice and big, so that it's got plenty of room there. Plonk it in the middle of the scene, and again I'll make it the same colour of grey. You could choose a different colour, of course, if you wanted. Okay, let's go back into the teapot a little bit closer. And without any lights in the scene, we see that it's this is the default lighting, but in fact there is actually a light, and it's kind of behind the camera, and it's the lightest areas are just ever so slightly to the right, I think, maybe. But we want to place our own lights now in the scene. First thing, if you're doing a clay render, you should add is a skylight. So under the lights, and create panel lights, standard skylight. Okay. Now to begin with, your skylight probably doesn't have cast shadows ticked on, so let's see what that looks like. And you might think, well, where's everything gone? What's actually happening now is everything is being illuminated evenly, and because it's all the same colour, you end up with entirely flat grey. So let's tick on cast shadows and let's see what happens. Okay, so a skylight essentially shines light on your entire scene from all angles. When you've got cast shadows on, the resulting effect is that places in cracks that are not exposed to sort of the wider environment end up darker. And this is sometimes called ambient occlusion. It's the same sort of thing. And you can see this does tend to take quite a while. Okay, so I skipped that a little bit. It took maybe a minute and a half or something. The reason mine took probably quite so long is I actually have under the skylight parameter, and I'll slide this up so that the box is a little larger. Under skylight parameters, raise per sample. I had that up to 20 because I was doing some really high quality stuff. 4 will probably get us ugly, but you can kind of see what's going on result. You see how grainy this is? Well, if you're watching this in high quality video, then it's grainy. Otherwise, you just have to take my word for it. It's very, very grainy, but it gives you the idea of what's going on, and that was obviously a lot faster. 8 might be okay for sort of everyday stuff. So let's leave it at maybe 8. See how that looks. Yeah, so still kind of grainy, but it'll do for now. Okay, so we've got a clay render which looks kind of nice. Let's say we particularly want to remember where that shot is. So I'm going to rotate my scene a little bit and get this looking, nicer kind of presentation angle. If you want to sort of remember where you took a shot from, the easiest way is actually to make a camera. And the way to do that is to press Ctrl and C. And you'll see now that I'm looking in my viewport from camera 01. And if you try and move your viewport around, it'll move kind of differently. That's because you're trying to move a camera. So we don't want to do that. We want to go back into perspective with the P key, and we can see that we've made ourselves a little camera. And if ever we want to go back to the same angle, we just pull this down under cameras, go back to camera 1. Okay, and I'm actually going to move this camera. One of the nice things about having a camera set up, you can move it with a sort of finer degree of control than you might otherwise be able to do. So I can actually move it using any of my other viewports, and you'll see that it's updating in real time here. So I'll just move it closer a little bit and take another render here from this angle. Okay, so let's add now a light to the scene to make it a little bit more interesting to look at. The light that I typically use is Omni, or you can use a direct or target light, but Omni seems to do most of the time what I want it to do, so I'm going to add an Omni light just to the right of the camera. It's nice to add them just to one side of your camera, which it just gives it a slightly more realistic, less glaringly front-lit lighting setup. Okay, let's take a look, see what that's done. Okay, this is good, but we're not casting a shadow, so what we're going to do is we're going to go into the parameters of the light and tick on shadows. With shadow map selected, in fact I'll leave it on shadow map so you can see what that looks like. Okay, not too bad, but you're going to have to take this from me. Shadow map sort of has its drawbacks because you're relying on saving the shadow to a texture. It can also be kind of slow and can leave sort of slight pixelation. So I don't tend to like shadow map too much, but sometimes it's necessary. So for this particular occasion, I'll show you also. Let's go with ray traced shadows, and you can see those. What we'll get is a very, very hard edged shadow, which isn't really what I want. I'm looking for a slightly softer shadow. So to do that, I'll cancel that. You can cancel the render at any time by pressing escape. To do that, I'll choose instead area shadows and re-render. Okay, not too bad. It's a little bit too soft for my liking. The way you control the softness of an area shadow is actually to change the size of it. If you think of a large light bulb, when it illuminates something, it's a very sort of spread, diffused shadow, or perhaps even a window, obviously being a larger light source. I guess so, that's the sun, but anyways, versus a torch, which is a very small light source, the larger light source will make a softer shadow. So I'm going to reduce the size of the shadow. It's under area shadows rollout of the Omni light, and I'm just going to reduce this to maybe 3 by 3. Let's try that again. Okay, that's looking pretty good. It's breaking up at the far edge there, and I'm not entirely sure whether that's the skylight or the area light, so I'm going to increase the quality of the skylight and just make sure that that's not doing that. In fact, I'll increase the quality of both of them just so you can see what's going on there. So that was increasing the samples cast by the skylight, and also in the Omni light I'll just increase the shadow integrity, which sort of prevents it from breaking up a bit, and the shadow quality a little bit. Now this really will start to take a little while. Okay, that's come out just how I'm after. I'm really pleased with that. I'm afraid with lighting and rendering, patience really is a virtue, so sometimes you just have to sit through it. The final thing that's sort of bothering me a little bit is this line here, which is the edge of my plane. Now I could keep making my plane larger and larger and larger, and eventually, as long as I am looking from above the horizon and looking somewhere near the horizon, there will always be a horizon line. So that's not an ideal solution. Instead, what I'm going to do is use a different material on the ground plane that only keeps a shadow. It's kind of otherwise effectively transparent. So although I'll be going more into materials later, I'll just show you that now. So I'll hit M to bring up my materials. Under standard, I'm going to change my material to matte shadow, which is here. I'm going to assign that to my plane. Now if I re-render, what will happen is the plane that won't get drawn except for where there's a shadow. Great, so this is looking really cool, but you might sometimes be asked to do a what's called 3-point lighting setup. The idea behind that is, I think, and I've kind of just gathered this from I don't know where, but having three different, ever so slightly different colours kind of brings out the form a little bit more than something that's very grayscale. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make my front light, which I'm going to grab this from my top-down view, and you can change the intensity of lights in the same way that I'm about to here. I'm going to put this down to maybe 0.8. I'm going to bring this around by using shift and drag, and make this a copy. And this light I'm going to have as maybe 0.4. And I'm going to have one final light behind it, always remembering where your camera is in this case. And this light we're going to have, yeah, that can be 0.4 as well. I'm going to make the color of these. I can change this under intensity, color attenuation here. Front one, I'm going to have a nice warm color, something like a yellow or even an orange. This will help bring it forwards. And the side sort of back one, we're going to go with a bluey green, I think. Well, greeny blue, I guess. Somewhere about there looks nice. And the back one we're going to have as I think maybe a green. Okay, go with real subtle out of preference. That tends to give much better results than really ham-fisting your colours. See, that green one was actually my strongest one there. Perhaps I should take this down a little bit, or even make it a little less green. Somewhere about there should be nice. And I can turn off, because I don't want these to cast shadows, and it'll also slow down my render time. Turn off the shadows from these two here. We're only going to be using them to light our object in slightly different colours. Okay, so I've probably gone a little bit too subtle with these. You can almost hardly see them, but have a play around and see what sort of things you like. All of this was done in the scanline renderer, which is the default renderer when you first open 3ds Max. So if you've never changed away from scanline renderer, that's all you'll ever know. But there are other ways to render using different engines, and I'll briefly show you one now that allows you to do some quite nice wireframe. So Mental Ray is the renderer I'm going to be using for this. So under rendering, render setup, I'm going to change my renderer, which in the common tab here, scroll right the way down, assign renderer, and you see here we have default scanline renderer. We're going to change the renderer by clicking the little ellipsis here and choosing Mental Ray renderer and hitting OK. And this will give us lots of different options in our render, which you can barely see because they're going off the screen a little bit. Let's pull that down. All these here. Now this is still my last render from the scanline renderer. I'm going to actually take off lots of the stuff here because I don't want my renders to take forever anymore. And what I'm going to do here is called a sort of a wireframe render, and it's going to show my wires very cleanly. So I've just hit F4 so you can see them, and what we're going to be showing here. Under the Materials tab, I'm going to change my material now that's been assigned to the teapot. I'm going to make it a composite material. So if I click the standard button here, I can choose a different type of material, and I'm going to choose composite. I'm going to discard it, is fine, because I'm going to make two new materials. I'm going to assign it to my teapot. Okay, so my base material, I'm just going to have a simple grey, which is fine. The material above that, I'm going to have another standard material, but this one's going to, instead of being just a color, I'm going to have it as wires. So I'll tick the wire box there, and I want the color of my wires to be black. So I'll go to black there. And if you, I'll go up to the parent. So we've got back to the composite material again. We've got these two materials here, and we can reduce the opacity of this one by just changing the number here, so 75%. And another nice way to present your models, if you've got a diffuse color on it, is to put the diffuse color in here and put maybe a white color at maybe 50% opacity to just white out a lot of your diffuse, but still have some of it showing through, and then your wires on top of it. Okay, so let's see what that looks like. And you'll see Mental Ray does this kind of weird blocky thing, which you might not be used to, but here we have the object with the wires on it, nice and neat. So this is quite nice to look at. If you find your wires are too small, go into your wire material and scroll down to extended parameters, and the size of the wire can be controlled here. So if I double the size of my wire, it'll be much thicker wires, which probably isn't appropriate for that model. It was probably fine as it was. So that's just one of the features of Mental Ray. Mental Ray also has lots of really powerful materials, so very clever things with light and reflections and all sorts of stuff like that, but can become very slow. If I just add in, I don't know, I'll add in some lights now to make things a little bit slower. Oops. And I'll choose to give shadows using Mental Ray Shadow Map. Turn that on, and that should slow things down a little bit. So you see here it's sort of plugging away, and if I increase my resolution, I can slow things down even more. So I'll go into my render setup using F10. I'll increase my resolution to 1980 by 1200 and hit render, and you'll see now how much slower Mental Ray can become. So it's doing a quick pass, and then it goes in and does little details and fiddles around, and it can take a bit longer. Okay, it's done now. But if we want to speed up our render time, let me make this window smaller. We have some controls under here that allow you to say, cut corners a little bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reduce the image precision, which will give our edges much more jagged edges. Let's see if we've got any. So these will become a bit more jagged, but that's okay. We're doing just a quick test render. And you can reduce the quality of the soft shadows and the glossy reflections. The one that really saves loads of time is to actually turn off Final Gather, but this does disable many of the features of Mental Ray. So if we do this now, this will be fast. And it's done. That was just a fraction of the time, but it does take off some of the nice features, and your renders will look worse for it, but useful for just testing things out. Okay, there's one more renderer I want to show you, which is sort of the fastest of all of them, at least if the quality you're given, but it has the fewest features, and that one is Quicksilver, and this is new to 3ds Max 2011. So if I just quickly change my renderer, I'll go into Assign Renderer and choose Quicksilver Hardware Renderer. And I should tell you there are computers that I've used that Quicksilver Renderer will crash Max very often. It's not a problem my computer suffers from at all. It's perfectly stable in mine, but it's not on all systems, so just be aware of that. Okay, now Quicksilver will not have the wires here that this has, so I'm going to take off the wires. I'm just going to assign just a grey material and hit render. Now the first render that you'll do will be very slow. That one wasn't too slow, but this is rendering at remember 1980 by 1200, and it's taking less than a second. And what this is great for is for doing animations, and this will work with normal maps and speculars and with many lights setups, but it's not nearly as fully featured for sort of area lights and fancy ray tracing stuff. So it's not always perfect, but can be suitable. So what I'm going to do now is I'll quickly show you how to make an animation to spin our teapot around. So what we've got here is this at the bottom here. If you've never looked at this, is the timeline, and I'm going to turn on auto key. I'm going to slide my timeline to the end, and I'm going to rotate my teapot a little. It doesn't really matter how much, just for now. I'm going to turn auto key off, and what's going to happen if we move the timeline along, we can see that it's moving. But we want to change that. We want to control that a little better. So we'll open the mini curve editor, and you can see here we have a curve. I'm using middle mouse click to pan, and I'm going to use shift and scroll down to just see the whole curve there. And I'm going to pick the start point and the end point, and I'm going to make those linear, so that it's no longer kind of slowly moving, slowly starting and slowly finishing. It's a straight transition. And on the right hand one, here we can see we've translated it or rotated it 100.1 degrees. We want to rotate it 360 degrees. And now we can use the yellow thing in the same way we scrubbed along with the timeline before to move through our timeline to the end. And now this is all going to be happening if we hit play pretty fast, which is usually much too fast for most turntables. You probably want to be showing your model a little bit slower than that so you don't make people dizzy. And the way we can do that is bring up the time configuration, and we're going to rescale time. If you simply make this longer, what will happen is you'll still be finishing your spin at 100, and then it'll not do anything until the time's up. By rescaling time, we actually make things happen over a slower period. So the end time, because we're going at 30 frames per second, let's say we want this to last 5 seconds, so that's 600 frames that we need. Now if we hit play, it'll be having a much more leisurely pace, which is perhaps a bit too slow, but we'll go with it anyway. Again, shift and control and mouse wheel down to scale time, so we can see the whole lot. There we go. And shift and scroll down to see the whole timeline, to change the y-axis, x-axis, or whichever one the upright one is. Let's go back to the beginning. Now to render this out as a video, we go into rendering, render setup, or F10. And ordinarily you've got single selected. Instead we're going to use active time segment, which is 0 to 600. And we're going to basically just hit render, and what's going to happen is it'll probably tell me if you haven't set up a file, you need to choose somewhere to save it to, so I'll do that very quickly now. So under render output, click files and choose somewhere to save it to. It's a model I've obviously done before, and I'm going to choose AVI. Let's call it test movie. And when I hit save, it'll ask me what type of compressions you want to use. I find the top one, Cinepack codec by radius, it's good enough. Compresses it at a nice rate without losing too much quality. And just hit render. Now the beauty of having a Quicksilver renderer assigned is it's very, very fast. This is a 1980x1200 video. If we make this, I'm going to cancel this, so hit escape, close this. If we make this just 320x240, this will absolutely power through them, and I'm okay with it overwriting. And you can see that it is rendering. If I make this active, the frames, several frames per second, which is great. So it's only going to take a couple of minutes to render 600 frames. This is when render time really becomes important. So Quicksilver is great for that. Okay, that's finished now. If I open that video, I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, so here's my little movie playing, little teapot spinning around. I probably should have set up the lighting a little bit better. And you can see that there's some pretty hefty compression going on in the video here, which is a bit of a shame, but c'est la vie. The last thing that I want to show you about rendering is, let's say you've got this rendering set up so that it's lit just the way you want it to be, but it's not very convenient to model in, or you're wanting to make changes and you don't want to use the lighting setup you've got. If we click on the top bit of this viewport here in the third section along, under lighting and shadows we use illuminate with default lights, then we're just seeing things exactly as they were, as though there were no lights in the scene, which is usually much easier to model in and things. And to change back, just do the same thing, illuminate with scene lights. However, for whatever reason, to actually get it to do that, you have to just like wiggle a light or something and then put it back to where it was before it'll actually recognize the change. Okay, that's what I wanted to show you for rendering. A bit of a crash course in rendering, but hopefully you've picked something up. Next video I'll be going over materials and textures, so see you there. Thanks for watching.